Hi everyone, just popping in to say that the audio on this episode, I'm afraid, is a bit chunky, clunky, and not necessarily the nicest sounding. Unfortunately, there have been some issues with the audio this week, and I do not have time to be able to re-record this episode. So I'm really sorry, it's going to be a little bit funkier sounding than usual, but I promise next time we'll be back to our normal audio crispy sounding selves. So thank you very much for your patience. Thanks for sticking with it, and hopefully you don't notice too much.
In the wake of the Roman invasion, when forces were called back to Rome, London was left abandoned and feared as a land made by giants. These tales of terror were spread far and wide, and soon the remaining Britons, Druids and pagans were known to be bloodthirsty, wild and ungovernable. But in all reality, it was the invaders that were now abandoning them who were truly terrible humans. Out in Europe, this unwarranted reputation began to stick, and this pushed away anyone who had a shred of fear that London was now ruled by giants who were undefeatable. But the city was now down to a few brave souls, and they lived their lives through a humble magic, day-to-day rituals, and they did their best to band together, with anyone left out on the apocalyptic streets. But how did such a bold story stick? And what happened to change people's minds to bring London back to life? And hundreds of years later, did a discovery of a mysterious Roman cult building uncover a few secrets which had remained literally buried? Today on Macabre London, we explore Roman rumours and the magic that raised the city from the dead. Before we dive into this episode, hi and welcome back. I'm Nikki Druce, your host with a silent G, and I'm so excited for you to join me on this next step of our journey into the occult in London. And if you're new here, please make sure you subscribe so you stick around for the full series. In these first few episodes of this new series, we're delving into how London became populated with its first residents, survived not one but two apocalyptic events, and even how it came to gain its name. But now the city has been abandoned for a second time, so what's next for these believers in magic? So if you've ever wondered about the belief systems we hold today, how they were formed and who were the brains behind them, let me guide you into the often gruesome landscape of religion and belief in London. If you want to keep up with my own behind-the-scenes explorations and experiments into the occult and magic, make sure you join me on patreon.com/Macabre London for more, where I'm explaining just how I'm writing this series using magic. If you sign up to the paid tiers, you'll also be in with a chance of winning an item to do with the series every single month. And the good news is the first draw is just about to happen over there. So if you want in, and the odds of winning are very good, then make sure you signed up to one of the paid tiers to be in with a chance. So now it's time to put in a shift at the rumour mill, because we're off to do some myth busting and set the record straight for ancient Londoners. About time really, isn't it? Alright, so in our last episode, we covered how London was repopulated by the Romans after Boudicca burned it to a crisp. Whilst under Roman occupation, it thrived and became an urban landscape which began shaping it into the heart of England. However, when the Romans were called home in 410 AD, when Rome was falling, London's 500 years of occupation suddenly ended, leaving it abandoned and defenceless. Those left behind, a mixture of a few Romans, some Roman Britons and Britons, didn't have enough resources to keep a city of this size going. Food, water and general daily supplies everyone had become so reliant upon suddenly didn't exist. Well, at least the manpower didn't exist to create them. There were no soldiers to keep the city safe, and now it was left open to anyone brave enough to come in. But the legends about London weren't going away anytime soon, and that's for good reason. The Romans had been spreading gossip all over the place about London and the people who they defeated to make it their own. And now, surely in their absence, with no one to keep them in line, the place was about to return to its wild roots. Now, we know there were plenty of druidic beliefs and practices spread around, but some religion came from Roman influence. The Romans spread the word of druids in their white robes and crowns made of leaves, worshipping trees, and a pantheon of gods. They shared how the Britons used human sacrifice to appease their many deities and spilled blood to please them by tying people to trees and slitting their throats. The Romans were notorious for spreading such tall tales that they began to become intermingled with their own weird magic. But one rather unsavoury belief which got mixed into all of this was something called haruspicy. This was actually a Roman form of magic which used animal entrails to predict the future. Divination via internal organs, if you will. I probably should have warned you if you're just tucking into a meal, but from here on out, things will be getting decidedly stickier, so you may want to put down that sandwich. Now, no one really knows if the Druids did practice haruspicy, but notorious tall tale teller Tacitus, who we can of course 100% trust and who had no hidden agenda at all, said that Druids were sacrificing people and then reading their internal organs to see if they contained messages from the gods. So where did Tacitus get these ideas? Well, from people living in Italy. Back before the Romans conquered everything, the Etruscans, the people who lived in Middle Italy, were big on using animal entrails to predict the future. We know this because many archaeological finds show this to be the case, with depictions of haruspicy upon them. One very important archaeological find was that of the liver of Piacenza. This was a brass liver discovered by a farmer in a field in the province of Piacenza, which would have been used by haruspex, a name given to the specialist organ readers, to know which god was speaking through each part of the liver. Now, did I consider carrying out this particular divination experiment on Patreon using the liver of Piacenza? Yes, for about 30 seconds, and then I realised that it would be far too gross, and no one would want to see that. So instead, I've opted to try out runes instead over there. So head to patreon.com/Macabre London if you want to see that at the end of the week. Anyway, back to the liver. The bronze liver was reported by an earlier Roman natural history author, Pliny the Elder, who recorded that it was split into 16 sections, and each section was attributed to an astrological house. So I'm sure there's some steps I'm missing, but you could look at the liver if it had a certain mark on it, and then you'd know that that particular god was sending you a message. Now, how do we know that Tacitus knew about haruspicy and the bronze liver? Well, he was a fan of Pliny the Elder, and so more than likely read his writings on the topic. So, bish bash bosh, Romans come along, need reasons to invade Britain because of the barbarian people living there, and ta-da, we get Druids who are haruspices. Now, of course, we know that the justification for invading Britain was because of the wild behaviours supposedly carried out by its natives, and we know that there was a shred of truth to this. After all, it's not as if Boudica was entirely measured in her response to the Romans. We know that she was entirely terrifying, and so were her gods and goddesses that demanded human sacrifice to be appeased. But the reality of what happened gets hugely exaggerated when the Romans return home, and their stories get written down and added to texts, which were then circulated for hundreds of years to come. Let's hear from Dr. Francis Young to put to bed one particular myth, which we've all just accepted as a part of history: the feared practice of human sacrifice, known as the Wicker Man.
How much truth is there behind that? How much do you think that actually happened, or do you think it's complete myth?
It's difficult to say. I mean, I would be surprised if there was nothing to it, because I think it's so creative. I'm not sure I would credit the Romans with sufficient creativity to have made it up from whole cloth. We find it in Lucan, for example, the Roman poet, who gives a little bit of detail about some of the Roman some of the Celtic gods. Talks about Asus and Taranis. And yeah, I mean, it may not have taken place in quite the way that Lucan describes it, in the sense that what we're presented with is the idea of a Wicca figure who is filled with multiple victims, both humans and animals. And I think the engineering challenge of creating something like that with people who presumably don't want to be in it probably would be insurmountable. But I think the idea that there might have been some offering of individual victims, whether humans or animals, inside some kind of Wicca structure, that's by no means unbelievable. There's no evidence for it from Britain. We often assume, oh, it was happening in Gaul, it must have been happening in Britain as well. Maybe, similar cultures, similar languages going on at that time. But yeah, we don't know. We don't know whether it happened in Britain. There's no archaeological evidence for it.
So, somewhere behind this elaborated practice does seemingly lie a shred of truth. But we know that the Romans loved a good old exaggerated story, and quite frankly, don't we all? So you can see how these stories got a little out of hand. But generally speaking, the official line that's spread around is that the Romans are the rational ones and the Britons are monstrous. But before the Romans are called back home, they do leave behind some interesting private magical secrets of their own. When archaeologists uncovered some delightful Roman drains in London, they found some interesting things discarded inside, one of which gives us an understanding of just how vendettas were settled almost 2,000 years ago in London. Metal sheets which had nails piercing them were found having been washed away, more than likely deliberately thrown away. When these metal sheets were inspected, archaeologists noticed that they had words etched into them. When deciphering their code, it turns out that these metal sheets contained some of the most fearsome curses, seemingly channeled towards real-life enemies. One such curse tablet that was found has been named the Trettia Maria, due to the person it was dedicated to. Now, no one knows who Maria was or what she'd seemingly done, or, let's face it, had done to her and was now being blamed for, but whoever wrote the curse wanted some terrible things to happen to her. It's understandable that the curse contained within was very personal and full of venom. These were strong wishes sent to the gods to exact upon poor Maria. Translated from Latin, it reads, I curse Trettia Maria and her life and mind and memory and liver and lungs mixed up together, and her words, thoughts and memory. Thus may she be unable to speak what things are concealed, nor be able, and then it just trails off. So from the sound of things, whoever wrote this is angry at Maria and wants her to suffer a terrible fate. But they also want her to keep her secrets, which makes you wonder what she knows about this person who is cursing her. Now, this wasn't an isolated incident. Many other curse tablets have been recovered in London and across the rest of Britain, and all of them are equally fierce in nature. These individual powerful curses were rolled up, shoved in walls, washed down drains, or buried with the intention of causing harm. This was energy magic in its purest form. These malicious workings targeted everyday people. Those who owed money, jealous lovers, and annoying neighbours could all find themselves having unmentionable amounts of harm wished upon them, most of which seemed pretty extreme for whatever it is they'd supposedly done. However, when you think about it, this is much like the angry email to your boss that you can write and then just delete. But in this case, you're offering out the person's wrongdoings and asking the gods to decide their fate. It's a sensible way to serve justice without getting yourself in trouble. But these curse tablets would have been common and a part of regular magic practices, even though they wouldn't have thought of it as magic then. It was just their way of life. But alongside these casual but albeit very harsh curses, there was something else happening underground, which was entirely secret. And for that, let's go on a little journey, because we're about to time travel.
This station is Canary Wharf. Change here for the DLR and the Elizabeth.
Just in case you wondered how I'm managing to look so smart and chic whilst I'm out and about, because of today's sponsor, Snag. Look at this cracking top. My lovely tailored trousers, which are so comfy, and I'm so pleased to have found these because they're just a real sort of all-rounder piece, so I'm really pleased with them. So if you want things that look fantastic, feel incredible on your body, and are just a delight to wear, before I would have never ever thought about wearing a wrap top. Sorry, the tube's coming in, so it's going to get a bit loud. Would have never thought about wearing a wrap top because I'm a booby girl, but this has been on all day
and it ain't flipping budged. And it's so comfy, and I'm so nice and warm as well. And this coat, you know I love this coat. So if you're looking for comfy, wonderful, fantastic, everyday clothing, then snag to your gal. Gotta go, my tube's here. I'm currently outside Walbrook on a little street just by the Magistrates Court, just outside little police box as well. This is where there was once a river. Very interesting thing about here is that Walbrook was once this active river, and so therefore it was a very tempting place for people to come and live, and a very prosperous place for people to come and live. So the Romans really liked it. And that's why when London was bombed during World War II, that a lot of archaeological important sites were uncovered. And we're going to go and see one of them. We're going to go today to the Mithraeum. I think that's how you pronounce it. I might be saying it wrong. Mithraeum, maybe. So the Mithraeum itself is actually a cult. It was a patriarchal cult that believed there was a sacrifice of a bull, which changed everything. So in 1954, discoveries were made here, and it was a very exciting time because lots of things were uncovered. The finest Roman sculptures you could see. So it's really good that they have preserved this place. And now you can go and see it. It is free. So we're going to go and have a look at the cult of the Mithraeum.
Inside the Mithraeum, you can see important relics discovered during digs. For reasons unknown, the ornate statues are in the care of the currently closed Museum of London, so we won't actually be seeing those today. But hopefully when the new museum opens later in the year in 2026, we can go and have a look. Here's some ambience from the experience for you all, and if you want to see the full immersive show, I'll be popping it on Patreon, so do head over there. So I'm going to have to talk quietly because I'm in a public place and everybody else is being quiet. But we're in the temple. This is pretty impressive, I have to say. They're just turning on the fans in here so I can talk a bit louder now, which is fine. They pump in mist into here to make it look like it would have been back in the day with the columns as well. You can imagine when they found this in 1954 that it was absolutely astounding. They found tons of animal bones here as well, so it gives us a really good idea of what people were doing here. They were hanging out, they were having a good time, they were feasting, they were worshipping their gods and worshipping Mithras. So Mithras, they have helpfully recreated at the end here. You can see him hanging out behind me, sacrificing the bull, and sacrificing the bull appeased his gods. So apparently the bull also has a scorpion on his testicles. Can't actually see it from where I am, but apparently that is the case. When this was found in 1954, they only had a certain amount of time to be able to do archaeological excavations. And so when they built the Bloomberg building, which sits on top of it now, they had more time to excavate, and they found all these writing tablets. There's about 100 of them, if not possibly more, and they had wax inside them. Well, the wax had evaporated, but they would have had wax inside them. So as you can imagine, they were incredibly helpful because they actually revealed so much about what was happening. It was all very mundane, day-to-day boring stuff. It's also the first time that we get a mention of London written down on one of these tabs. So this really was somewhere that was part of real solid Roman London life. And I feel really privileged to have been able to come and see it. And I can tell that they're wanting to kick me out, so I'm going to go. In the Museum of London's possession is the large marble wall carving, which was removed for safekeeping. On the carving, and now would be a good time to switch to video on Spotify or YouTube if you haven't already, you can see the image of Mithras on the back of the bull, plunging a knife into his neck, as other creatures and gods assist in taking it down. A dog is trying to lick the wound of the bull. Then behind, looking on, are the sun and the moon, overseeing the chaos. To add insult to injury, as I mentioned before, there is a scorpion also dangling from the bull's nether regions. But fear not,
This is not literal animal cruelty at play here. This bull is representative of Taurus. As we know, the Romans, alongside their Druid counterparts, used astrology every day. Mithras is conquering the bull and doing it with the guidance of the sun. Now, we don't know exactly what the belief was because it was a secretive cult, but Mithras was thought to be known as the unconquered sun. It's also thought his birthday was on the 25th of December, which may just clash with someone else's birthday we'll encounter in a few episodes' time. The unconquered sun may be the reason it was a patriarchal, rather boisterous group. We know there were 7 levels within the cult, which ascended to pater, meaning father. It's thought the men who were initiates had some kind of military training, or were at least practicing to become soldiers. But more than all of these things, we know this was a social club. It was a chance to go away into the fake cave, carry out some rituals, eat, drink, and be merry. The Romans loved to drink. They were also partial to cannabis and even opium, and there were no laws to restrict such substances, so people used them at will. But we will be covering psychoactive substances as they relate to belief in an episode later down the line, so we'll go into more detail about that then. But it's safe to say that this was a boys' club. It just had a little bit more magic and worship woven in than you may expect, and it was definitely all very hush-hush. The temple sits on the bank of the now buried Walbrook stream, which at one time ran into the River Thames. Now, travelling just a short distance away from the Mithraeum and getting back in our time machine, we're travelling forward in time to 1988, when a new archaeological discovery uncovered if this secret cult may have just had something to do with not 1, not 2, but 39 skulls of young men found in the dried up river. These 39 skulls and 1 thigh bone all had something in common. They were almost all thought to be men. There were just 3 that were unable to be gendered, and they all had wounds upon them. Now, originally the dig was just going to be picking through what was thought to be an old drain and a rubbish dump, because even though they're unsavoury options, they provide a great amount of archaeological discoveries. But when the dig began, something different began to emerge. When the 39 skulls were found, they were carefully collected and sent to the Museum of London for analysis by human bioarchaeologists, which sounds like a fascinating job. Why did I never learn that was an option until now? These experts were able to determine that these skulls had 2 types of wounds upon them. Some were fresh and had been the cause of death, and others had blunt force trauma which had healed. So whatever was going on, these were all young people who had some kind of head injury. Some were tested to see where they came from, and by tracing the minerals found in the skulls, these were consistent with them having been born in Britain. Now, I'm assuming this process is probably really costly or time-consuming, or both, because only 2 of the skulls were tested. Separate DNA analysis showed one of the men would have had dark hair and dark eyes. So now comes the tricky part. Who were these men, and how did their skulls happen to be buried inside the city walls? Romans didn't bury their dead in their cities. Instead, they had separate burial spaces outside of London, which means these people had been made an exception of. Was this a secretive burial site? Was it to do with human sacrifices made by the nearby Temple of Mithras? Was this a Roman serial killer pit? Were these skull trophies obtained in battle, which were then left behind when the city was abandoned? Well, I know it's unsatisfying, but there is no definitive answer. What does seem like another likely option is that a nearby cemetery was eroded and the skulls washed into a pit in the Walbrook before it dried up. But what we do know is that these were 39 people who suffered a violent end. Now, what does seem like a likely option is a discovery that was made a few hundred metres away, a Roman amphitheatre. It's likely there would have been gladiatorial battles here where men would have died, and perhaps they had a collection of skulls or paraded around the losers' severed heads when they were defeated. In Rome, there were sculptures which did show Roman soldiers holding aloft the heads of their defeated enemies in battle. So what's to say the same thing didn't happen here? We know headhunting was an important part of Roman rituals, and they would often travel with the heads of their defeated enemies. Was this a Romans versus Britons fight club where the losers paid with their heads? Remember how the Romans like to call the Britons barbaric? Well, this seems a little like the pot calling the kettle black, if you ask me. One final option is that these were the heads of Boudicca's victims during her annihilation of the city. But given the analysis showed that at least 2 of the victims were born in Britain, it seems unlikely unless she did slaughter those who were captured by the Romans. Interestingly, 2 things about the skulls tell us something important. One was found with a water beetle up its nose, which suggests these skulls were left to rot in a pool of water. One of the skulls also had soft tissue damage and teeth marks upon it from a dog, showing it had been gnawed upon. So these were people who had truly been left to rot and decay. They were not people who were treated well in death. Now, bringing it back to the Roman abandonment, when they were called home and they left London to rot, the population shrunk in size and banded together. With everything abandoned, what would happen next? Well, in the previous episode, Dr. Francis shared how the Anglo-Saxons were terrified of the abandoned city built by giants, and so they set up shop outside the city walls and made London wick. Now, I don't know about you, but if I arrived in an abandoned town which still had decaying bodies and skeletons in it, I too would think that was a bit suspicious and haunted, so it made sense that the Anglo-Saxons would be wary and wait it out. But where did the myth of the giants come from? Well, firstly, the architecture was very different to what the Anglo-Saxons were used to. They had been used to timber structures, and so when they saw mighty things built from stone, that was incomprehensible to them and freaked them right out. So they decided to settle in places further away. What is now known as modern-day Croydon and Greenwich was the start of the Anglo-Saxon settlements because they knew South London is where it's at, and West London was and is still uninhabitable. There, I've said it. Come at me, West Londoners. I'll be ready to take you, because you'll take about 3 to 5 business days to get to me anyway. The next stages were really gradual for London. It's a century-by-century process of slow construction and small settlements. In fact, it takes 5 centuries for the abandoned Roman city to begin to be populated again. It's got pockets of people, but as a place to live in and defend, it takes hundreds of years to build up the resources required to protect such an infrastructure. In the meantime, the land is being eyed again by conquerors, but soon the people will descend upon London once more, and with them they'll bring tales from the country. Outside of London, there truly roamed monsters. Werewolves, undead corpses, vampires, and even more giants, just to name a few. Next time on Macabre London, on belief in the occult in the capital city, we'll be learning about the monsters who moved into London when we start to get all kinds of medieval. So make sure you join me then to find out more. Thanks for spending time with me today for this episode. Leave me the skull emoji in the comments on Spotify or YouTube if you've made it this far, so I know who's out there. All engagement is really useful to appease the algorithm gods, so this is one small act of magic you can carry out, which I am ever thankful for. If you're already super excited for the next episode, why not pop over to Patreon to get more content and to help me make this series? You'll get access to my magical experiments, my pod mortem episodes, and you'll also be entered into the monthly prize draw where you could win something to do with this series. And the odds of winning are pretty good. Just head to www.patreon.com/Macabre London. The link is in the show notes, and also on the end screen of the video on YouTube. A big shout out to our wonderful top tier patrons, Sam, Sarah, Veronica, Mary, Christina, Sally, Christophe, Ravelle, Jemma and Matilda. And a big thanks to all of my other patrons too. You're incredible and thank you so much for your support. Thanks to Dr. Francis Young for his help with the past few episodes. Do please go and buy his amazing books at drfrancisyoung.com. And we'll be hearing from him again later on in the series. A huge big thank you to Snag for sponsoring this series. They really are a wonderful company and they cater for everyone and everybody. So be sure to check them out at www.snagtights.com. Thanks for joining me for another macabre and magical tale from the city's past. I've been Nikki Druce. Remember to stay spooky and I'll see you ghouls next time.